Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the podcast. It has been a few weeks since I've sat down to record, and I'm just so excited to be back. It's been big few weeks. I just came back from New York. I was recording a podcast episode actually at the LinkedIn office in New York City in the Empire State Building. How cool is that? Their office is in the Empire State Building. It just was such a fun experience, and it's something that I wanted to do for a couple of years. So I'm just so happy and proud that we made it. We made it happen, and you'll see the episode on the LinkedIn's podcast Get Hired in the next couple of months. So keep an eye on that, and I will make sure to update you on that. And Andrew Simon and he is one of the editors at LinkedIn News at LinkedIn, and he and I sat down to talk about job search. Of course, we talked about how to make job search experience more enjoyable. We talked about very specific tactical steps that you can take right away to turn your job search around. So the episode is full of value, and I can't wait for you to get your hands on it. And my team and I have also been busy with big updates that we have made on our end with our clients, and specifically within the Star Canada program that is our signature job search coaching program. And we have officially moved the program to a new platform, and it is something that I have been dreaming about and imagining for over a year, and it was a big move on the back end. But for you now, it means that it's even better experience and faster results, because now everything is within one platform. All the coaching, the content, our community, everything is within one platform, one interface, and it's now easy to find any sort of answer you're looking for in seconds, because now everything that we have done, whether it's existing content, whether it's past coaching calls, everything is now searchable. And you have the event calendar, so it's really easy to see when the next coaching call is and sign up for it. So it's just made to help you move through the process even faster. And again, it's something that I've been dreaming about and imagining for you guys for over a year. So I'm just so grateful that we finally made it happen. We made the move, and we now have a really exciting daily hub and community where I'm already seeing, we just moved yesterday really, and I'm already seeing so much engagement, and people are sharing, hey, here's what I've done, this is the loom that I recorded after my interview, and then other people are looking at it, hey, this is awesome, I'm gonna do something similar as well. So you're not just learning from me, but you're also seeing everyone else's experience, and that allows you to go even faster, and I also feel like you're not alone in this process, and people are again sharing what they're working on and their wins, and it's just again so good. And we've also been busy in the program, so many amazing wins every time I go. Actually, in our past group, our past community before we moved, it was a LinkedIn group. So every time I would go into that LinkedIn group in the last few weeks, just the updates, so amazing. I'll just give you a few because they just make me so proud. For example, Matt found a role. It's a director of finance role that is just perfect for him. He saw it. He's like, yes, it checks all the boxes I wanted. So he went all in the way I teach my clients. He went all in with reaching out to people, getting people on the phone to talk to him. He got a networking conversation. From there, he recorded a video as part of the next step, as part of, again, proactively recorded a video as part of his kind of application and the next steps. So love this movement for him. Swati has, I think she's had 3 interviews for PMM, so product marketing manager role this week. She had 4 interviews last week, and that all has happened in a matter of 2 months. I believe she joined us just a couple of months ago, and just the change, seeing the change in her. And I told her that in coaching yesterday, that you're glowing, your energy is so different from where you were a couple of months ago. And what's interesting is that she said, hey, this shift happened for me before I had all of these interviews. I first started feeling this way. I started feeling like, yeah, I'm a superstar. I can do anything. I can achieve anything. Let's go. And then the interviews happened. And I told her that absolutely, that's always how it works. First, it's your energy, your mindset, your confidence, and then come the results. And of course, you cannot mindset your way to an amazing job offer. She has been putting in the work. She has been networking. She has been getting out there. And she got half of those interviews through direct referrals. So she was implementing the strategy, but strategy always has to be supported with the mindset work. And she said, hey, listen, nothing was working until I started working on the mindset module. And I gave her very specific exercises there to do every single day. And that's what helped her see this shift in herself. And I'm kind of going on a tangent here, friends, but I just can't stress this enough that for you to go to that next level in your pay, in what you do, you need to be next level. Your confidence, again, how you show up, your energy needs to be next level. It needs to match that offer that you're after. So that's a big part of what you learn in the program, what we teach in the program, and what I focus with you in the program. And it's just always so fun for me to watch this transformation in real life. A few other updates that I'll share with you from our clients. Kelsey joined, I believe, about a month ago, and she said, I'm feeling so much more confident. I stopped applying. In the last month, have booked a dozen networking conversations. I feel like I know what's next. I feel like I know what to do. And I just feel different. And again, notice the feeling here because it again starts with that always. I reached out and said, hey, I've been killing it with networking. I got to say it's working. And this happens every single time. When you guys start in the program, you always tell me, the first thing you tell me, oh, it's taking time. And then I say, just stick with it. It has that snowball effect. And then you reach back out to me 2 weeks later and I don't know what's happening, but it's working. And I have now all of these conversations. So that's exactly what happened with her. And she said, I gotta say, it's actually working. She said she has an interview later this afternoon that she's booked. So I'm just, again, so proud of you guys. And I know Vanessa also has an interview this week. She is in clinical research in New York City. And same thing. She told me last week, we saw actually each other in person in New York. And she said, I got to say, what you teach and networking, it works. It works. And of course it does. Of course it does when you network strategically, when you have the right intention, when you have the right messaging, when you're not asking for a job, it of course works. Now, today's episode is about interviews and about something that I have been coaching my clients inside the Star Candidate on over and over again. And something that I have noticed is what most candidates actually don't prepare for, especially at multiple six-figure levels, at mid to senior career levels. They don't really think about it. They don't prep for it. And I believe that's what really is keeping them stuck and keeping them from actually converting that interview into an offer. Here's what I mean. I posted a little survey both on Instagram and on LinkedIn a few weeks ago. And I asked, for you, what is the hardest part about mid to senior level interviews? And here were the options: positioning myself clearly, choosing the right examples, handling objections while staying concise and structured. The number one leading answer by far was staying concise and structured. And that doesn't surprise me. That said, staying concise and structured, I can teach you how to do that in an hour. I teach that in Master the Interview, that, by the way, has recently been fully revamped and updated. I give you very specific communication frameworks. I teach you how to use them, learn them in an hour, practice for a few hours, you're ready to go. I promise you, this is actually really easy and straightforward to do. And this is something, kind of a skill that you do need to learn. But once you have those frameworks top of mind and you start practicing them, not just in interviews, but in your everyday communication at work, they will become second nature. So I do truly believe that this is the easy part. Yet, most people, most candidates believe that this is the number one thing that's stopping them. Now, what I thought was fascinating is that the answer, handling objections well, was the least popular answer. Only really a couple of people picked that. And I immediately thought, we've got to talk about this, because this is actually the number one problem for you without you realizing. Because when you walk into an interview, no matter how amazing you are, how strong of a fit you are, the employer will have objections to hiring you. And some of them are very straightforward. They're conscious because maybe you don't have a very specific experience that they're looking for. That's an objection to hiring you in their head. Maybe not you because you haven't worked on this technology or with this client or at this level of seniority. That's the objection that they have in their head walking into the interview. Some objections, however, are kind of unspoken, and we'll talk about what those are and how to prepare for them. But the reality is that you just don't think about this, and most candidates don't, which again, the results of these surveys show that most candidates don't think about this proactively. And because they don't think about it proactively, they don't prepare for it. But I'm here to tell you that this is something that you need to be preparing for before the interview, and you need to be including pretty much in every single answer so that you overcome those objections that the employer has proactively, whether they ask about it or not. So what are the conscious objections? So those are things like maybe you're making a career pivot. So you have, let's say you're in marketing and you're transitioning from CPG into fashion. We have a client in the Start Canada program who is doing that. That will always be the number one objection that the employer will have. And that's, hey, you haven't worked in fashion. You don't have that industry experience. That's an objection. Maybe you haven't used a very specific tool that that team is relying on. And you might be thinking, well, yeah, I haven't used it, but it's not a big deal. I use something similar and I'm a quick learner. This is not a big deal. And it's often not a big deal. However, if they have a candidate, another candidate they're interviewing who has that, who has worked with that technology or with that tool, they don't have that same objection to hiring that other person. They will have another objection based on their experience, but they won't have the same objection. So it's on you to think about this proactively and address it proactively. So most candidates, instead of addressing those objections head on, they either don't even think about it because you're really prepared. Okay, what are they going to ask me about? Okay, they're going to ask me about my experience in this. They're going to ask me about conflict. They're going to ask me, tell them about yourself. This is what I'm going to prepare for, right? So you either don't even plan for it, you don't think about it at all, or you kind of just cross your fingers thinking, okay, I just hope they're not going to ask you about it. Because if you are pivoting, you probably are thinking, okay, they might ask me about my experience in fashion because I don't have any. So you're maybe thinking, okay, well, maybe this is what I can talk about if they ask me. Maybe I can talk about my courses that I took here and why I'm interested in it. But you don't really want to, right? Like you kind of feel awkward and weird about it because you don't feel strong about it. So maybe you think about it. Maybe you even prep for that one specific question, but you're not proactively bringing this up yourself. So you essentially need to frame the conversation around those objections yourself, rather than waiting for them to bring them up. Because if they're thinking that objection going into the interview, it's already shaping their decision before they even interview you. So they look at your resume and the fact that you got an interview, especially if it's further rounds than the HR round, if they got the interview, they know you can probably do the job. But when they look at your resume, they're already thinking, I don't know, she doesn't have experience in this industry or with this tool. Okay, let's see. So that's the energy and the mindset they're walking into the interview with. And by the time the objection is voiced by them, so they ask you about your experience in, again, let's say fashion in that example, if they ever do, because oftentimes they don't, it may be too late because the whole time in the interview, they've been thinking this and they've had this energy. So the top candidates think about this differently. And the top candidates don't wait for those objections. They frame the conversation proactively around those objections. And they weave in very specific facts and experiences throughout their answers. Now, this is something that we spend a lot of time on with my clients in the Start Canada program. So when you are moving on to, let's say, second round, third round, and we talk through it, the first question I always ask you is, what do you think their objection to hiring you is going to be? So what is it that you might be lacking for this role? Because we need to prepare for it proactively. And in the program, and by the way, in Master the Interview course, you get all the same tools and steps and resources. So Master the Interview course is part of the Start Canada program. I teach you how to build your interview alignment plan step by step. So you're mapping out, okay, this is what they're looking for. This is what I bring to the table. And with that, here are all the objections they're going to have. Okay, now that I know the objections, I'm going to be bringing them up proactively throughout my answers, starting with number one, and this is the number one way to address them, to frame the conversation in the very beginning, is to do this in tell me about yourself. So the very first thing really that you're talking about. So whether it's tell me about yourself or tell me about your experience. So most people here focus on, here are all the cool things that I have done. Here's everything that I've done in my career, everything I bring to the table. Maybe your strategy is a little bit more elevated, where you are focusing on what the employer is looking for. So you're focusing on everything that you do have, right? So when you're creating that plan, you're mapping it out. Okay, this is what they're looking for. This is what I have corresponding. Okay, I'm good. But this is also the time to bring up that piece, that biggest objection that they would have. So let me give you a couple of examples here. For example, just yesterday in our coaching session, Renee and I were talking about her interview, I believe, second round of interviews, and she's interviewing for a director level role. And she said, well, to be honest, I've never officially managed anyone. And in this role, she'll have 4 reports. And she's thinking about it. So I told her, listen, because you're thinking about it and you know you haven't done this, this is going to be one of their objections that, okay, Renee is great, but she hasn't managed a team yet. So naturally, what happens here, you kind of start really doubting yourself. Well, can I actually do this? Is this, the right fit? Maybe I'm not ready. And you kind of start spiraling here. So of course, you kind of want to almost avoid this whole thing altogether. So instead, what we talked about is, okay, let's actually find anything in your experience that proves that you have the skill of managing someone. So we talked about, okay, where have you acted as a leader? Where were you in a position where you had to look for someone's skills and talents and direct them into really fostering that? And where did you have to have a difficult conversation with someone when they were not performing? And she said, well, my background and experience and what I do is resource management. That's quite literally what I do. I look at people on the team and I structure the team in a way where their talents are used in the best, most efficient way possible. And I said, well, that literally what it is. That literally is managing a team. Just you call it differently. You name it differently. So with that, we have found that transferable skill. We have found that, hey, you have done the job. You have done what you're looking for. It just wasn't an official title on your resume that you had this many people report to you. So with that, what we said is that needs to be part of your tell me about yourself. Because for this director level role, they are looking for someone who is going to bring this leadership skill. And let's talk about, hey, for someone in this role, this is what's important. And this is where I have done this. So, and again, we've talked about it on the podcast. We always want to bring it up back to the employer. Why does it matter to them? Hey, this is what a big part of this role is. And I have full confidence that I'm ready because I've done this for the last 20 years. Now, let's talk about how to do this when those objections are not so conscious. Here's what I mean. Non-conscious, subconscious objections are almost bias. So things like, maybe this person has a family and young kids. So how are they going to handle this leadership position? So maybe you have young kids. So the bias there is, okay, well, can she handle this leadership position in this kind of high stakes, maybe a little bit intense of a position with young kids? Or maybe you have an accent. So those are all biases realistically, but they are those subconscious objections that the employer would have. Now, I bet you yourself know what those are, because typically it is something that you are in your head about. I've shared this before. For me, for a long time, it was my accent. I kept thinking that my accent is something that will prevent me from growing in my career, from getting into six-figure roles, from being in sales. By the way, it did not whatsoever. But because I was so in my head about it, I kept thinking that that will be the reason that I won't get hired. And of course, it affected how I showed up and my energy. And it really only shifted when I started addressing that head on and tell me about yourself and making it my selling point that, hey, instead of me thinking, hey, this is what's going to prevent me from getting this role, let's flip it into, I've lived in multiple cities, multiple countries, I speak 4 languages. And this is why it's important to you, because I've built connections, both professional and social, from scratch every single time that I moved. And that's the exact skill that you want for someone in sales. So all of a sudden, something that makes me different, this bias typically is something that makes you different. All of a sudden, it's something that is exciting about me. All of a sudden, it's my selling point. So I'll tell you a couple of other examples of how we've handled this with my clients in the past. Another example I want to share here is an example of my client, Anastasia. She was in the Start Canada program a few years ago, a director at a bank, very senior, but she had 3 young kids. And she kept thinking, well, how am I going for these director level senior roles with 3 young kids? They will think that I cannot do it. And we started digging there with her. And she said, you know what? Actually, my kids are my motivation. I want for my kids to be proud of me. So we actually made that, again, her selling point. We included that instead of waiting for that to be brought up and for that to maybe come up at some point in the interview. We made it her selling point because it's a big part of who she is. We want, with Anastasia, for her future manager to know that she has 3 young kids. We don't actually want to hide it because she wants to have the manager who understands it and supports it. So we don't want to hide it with her. So we made it, again, part of her Tell Me About Yourself, where she talked about, hey, I'm a mom of 3 kids and I can do anything. I can achieve anything in a very short period of time because that's what being a mom made me. And my kids are also my motivation and I want them to be proud of me. That's why I want to continue growing in my career. How much more powerful is that compared to trying to hide it and feeling weird about it? Another example I have for you is Sam. He was in the program, again, a few years ago now, and he had a stutter. And he was really nervous about it. He's a marketing manager. And we, again, included that in his Tell Me About Yourself. and made it his selling point that, hey, I grew up with a stutter and that made me better as a person, as a professional. I'm someone who prepares a lot more for any sort of conversation, for any sort of meeting. I'm a lot more empathetic and patient. And we really connected it back to why it makes him better at his job as a marketing manager. And fascinating thing happened here. Sam told me that, listen, once I started doing that, it made me not nervous that I have a stutter. And I just felt so much better and more confident throughout the interview. And then every time I would talk about it, the interviewer would say, oh, well, you know what? My sister has a stutter. So I totally get it. And because now he's addressed it and he feels more confident and they've talked about it, he said, I would actually have less of it, a lot less during the interview because I'm less nervous. But that's what I mean by you framing and including that objection in the very beginning in tell me about yourself, whether it's experience, the specific experience that you might not have, or it's that kind of unconscious or rather maybe unspoken objection that they might have. Okay, step number 2 here with these objections and preparing is you need to start weaving them into your answers throughout. So when you are creating this interview alignment plan that, again, I teach you in the Start Candidate program and a Master the Interview course, when you are mapping out, okay, this is what they're looking for, this is what I bring to the table, here are all the stories that I must share, this is when you start also looking at those objections that they will have. And there will be some big ones like, hey, you don't have this experience, but there will be some smaller ones like, you know what, she lives too far away, she's probably not going to enjoy this commute. That is an objection as well that they might have. Now, let's stick with that example of Renee that we've been talking about earlier and her interview for a director level role and not having managed people. Another thing that we talked about with her with objection was she has a lot of agency experience, and this role is within a very corporate environment. So again, that will be one of the objections on the hiring manager's mind because he or she will be thinking, okay, well, is this big picture a good fit with how we work? Because it's an internal agency role. So it is an agency. So we want someone who has that experience, but it's also very corporate. So you have this stakeholder communication and red tape and everything that comes with corporate and, brand expectations. So it is an objection. So we said, okay, if that's another objection, let's weave it throughout your answers and make sure that you speak to both your agency experience, because that's your selling point, and your experience in the corporate world and speaking with senior executives and really mapping out your action plan and presenting it and selling it to that executive corporate team. And let's weave it throughout different answers where you highlight both proactively. You're very conscious of highlighting those things in your answers. And again, you guys know I always tell you explaining to the employer every time why it matters to them. So every time you bring it up in your answer, you say, and listen, for this role, both are important. And that's why I feel very strongly that this is such a good fit because I have experience in both. So that's what I mean when I say you have to weave it and think about it throughout your answers. And it often is just that one sentence and just one conscious thought. But we're, again, addressing their objections, not just once in the beginning, but all throughout that conversation. So that objection is either fully handled or doesn't come up anymore. All right. And finally, number 3, the way you can be addressing these objections is with the impact preview deck. So again, this is something that I teach my clients to do. You don't have to, but realistically at this level, if you're going for multiple six-figure roles, I've talked about this before, it's a big sale. So just a couple of hours of conversations with the hiring manager and, someone very senior is just oftentimes not enough to show them the type of impact that you're going to bring. So that's where the impact preview deck comes in. Essentially, it's a document where you demonstrate how you think, you demonstrate your initiative, but essentially it focuses on, listen, based on all the conversations that I've had with you guys, this is where I see your challenge or opportunity as a team or as a project or even as a company. And this is where I believe and how I believe you can address this challenge, solve this challenge, or address this opportunity. And on top of that, here is similar type of work that I have done where I have addressed this type of challenge in the past. So you're really helping them see how you think. And it doesn't have to be perfect in terms of this is the exact challenge that they have and the exact solution that they can implement tomorrow. So it doesn't have to be perfect because you're not on the inside and you don't have all the facts, but it's showing how you think and it's showing, hey, I have worked on similar challenges before and these were the results. So it's about a 10-page deck, sometimes smaller, sometimes bigger, but it is something that most of my clients now are doing for the roles that they really, really want because they want to show them that, hey, I can do this at this next level. And again, this is an opportunity to overcome those objections around any sort of experience that you might not have. So let's say if it's industry experience, well, that's okay because I understand your challenges and I've worked on similar problems. Even if they are in a different industry, I've worked on them before. So we teach you how to do that in the Start Canada program, but it is something that I want for you to start thinking about. Can I go beyond just prepping for interview answers? And I know some of you listening here are, well, you know what? I'm already investing so much time and effort into job search, but this is a reminder. They're investing hundreds of thousands of dollars in you. It's a huge risk for them. When they're hiring you for this high-level role, it's expensive. It's a big risk for them. So it's not easy for them to make this decision. So make it easier for them. Yes, it's work, but it's a big decision. It's a big sale. So you got to work for this big sale. All right, with that, we've talked about weaving those objections and overcoming those objections throughout your answers. We've talked about the impact preview deck, and we have also talked about including it in Tell Me About Yourself. So you're really framing this conversation and addressing this head on in the very beginning. So I am so curious how this landed for you. Whether you have proactively in the past thought about employer objections, whether you are going into the interview proactively thinking about it, and how are you going to act on it now that you're conscious of this, now that you know that this is a problem and this isn't something that you have worked on in the past. I challenge you to think about this, the objections that the employer has to hiring you before your next interview, and prepare with these 3 steps. And of course, if you want help, join Master the Interview. I teach you how to do that step by step. And if you want A to Z help in your job search and you want my help every step of the way and you want to have all the resources, community, and coaching, join us inside the Start Canada program. That is it for today. If you're enjoying the podcast, and I know a lot of you are because you send me messages every single day about how you've been tuning into the podcast and it's been really helping you see job search differently and approach it differently, then please take a couple of minutes, leave a review on Apple Podcast if that's where you're listening to the podcast, or just like it on Spotify if you are listening on Spotify. It really helps me out and I would really, really appreciate your support there. That's it for today. I will see you in the next episode next week. Bye for now.